Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Lab Manager Academy webinars. My name is Kaylee Thomas, and I am the Events Manager for Lab Manager. Today, I am sitting in for our regular host, Jeff Tobe, who is off on a canoeing trip. This webinar series would not be possible without the support of Unity Lab Services. Now we're going to hear a few words from Fran Cleach, the Global Marketing Manager at Unity Lab Services.
Thank you, Kaylee. As always, we're proud to be a sponsor of this valuable webinar series for lab managers. At Unity Lab Services, we are all about possibilities, so I'm very interested to hear more on today's topic, from problems to possibilities, coaching skills for managers. Those of you who have attended previous webinars have heard me talk about Unity Lab Services, the service brand from Thermo Fisher Scientific, developed specifically to maximize your lab workflow through innovative service solutions. An overview of these services can be seen on the right side of your screen. In addition to our traditional instrument-level service offerings, such as support plans, training, and parts and accessories, we offer a full suite of enterprise services that provide service solutions for all instrumentation and equipment in a lab, regardless of vendor. Enterprise-level services include consulting services, supply management services, asset management services, and scientific support services. As I've mentioned before, I've had the opportunity and the privilege to meet many of you at trade shows such as PickCon, and have heard many stories about the difficulties of balancing the core work of your lab, in addition to handling activities like scheduling routine maintenance for equipment, handling service calls, and managing service invoices. One of the most common questions we do hear is the question of how to use a service provider to lessen the burden of administrative work, gain optimal tracking and metrics for service activity, and maximize your lab's productivity. To answer that question, we put together the informational webinar you see on your screen, Co-sourcing Lab Services, the Advantages of Partnering versus Outsourcing. We recognize that lab managers are asked to balance a wide variety of activities to achieve the best results within your lab. To help you evaluate support for that activity, this webinar will discuss how to leverage a service provider as a partner. Hybrid programs that allow laboratories to maximize internal resources as well as external expertise can deliver streamlined results, enhance efficiency, and lower total operating costs. To learn more, we invite you to listen to this webinar, which can be found in the resource list box in your webinar window. We hope to speak with you soon and invite you to enjoy today's webinar. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much for all your support, Fran, and Unity Lab Services. I'm really excited about today's webinar, but before I introduce our presenter, please know that she welcomes your questions throughout the entire presentation. Just type your query into the question box on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, and we will try to get to it during our short time together. If we did not get to your question, our presenter will receive your questions via email and hopefully get back to you within the week. Also, just a reminder that all webinars are archived on the Lab Manager website, and you will be notified via email when the video is available. And make sure you visit the resource list on the left-hand side of your screen to visit our presenter's blog, the course sourcing webinar, and other relevant materials. So let's get on with the reason you are all here. Dr. Marcia Reynolds coaches top talent and executives and teaches classes in leadership and coaching skills around the world. Her current passport shows her working in 34 countries to date, and that is just in the past 8 years. She combines 17 years as president of her own leadership development firm, co-visioning with 16 years holding leadership positions inside companies. Her experiences give Marcia insight into what blocks communication and innovation in companies and teams and what is needed to bring people together for better results. She has a doctorate in organizational psychology and 2 master's degrees in communication and education. She is also a past president of the International Coach Federation and one of the first 25 people in the world to earn the Master Certified Coach designation. In her spare time, she writes books and blogs. Her first 2 books, Outsmart Your Brain, a book for anyone wanting to be the master of their brain, and Wonder Woman, written specifically for high-achieving women, have been quoted in many publications, including Fortune magazine, Harvard Management Review, and the New York Times, and she has appeared on ABC World News. Her new book, The Discomfort Zone, How Leaders Turn Difficult Conversations into Breakthroughs, will be available in October, and there is a link for that in the resource area. She will share some of the research and coaching techniques she developed for the book in her presentation today. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Marcia Reynolds.
Thank you, Kaylee. I want to give it just a brief background. The whole coaching area. I was an internal trainer for 16 years before I started my own business, and taught management skills all those years. And so much of it was focused on how do you talk to people? How do you give them feedback? How do you set goals? And we would say things, you have to listen, you have to respond with empathy, and as if you are speaking with them. But I don't think I even fully understood what that was until when I left my last corporate position. I got involved with the whole emotional intelligence area. The book had just come out, and I thought it was really fascinating looking at how the brain works and truly understanding how people learn. And at the same time as when I got involved in coaching, and when I realized, it's amazing how different it is when you use coaching technique than when you actually tell people. And so the first part of this webinar, I am going to take a look at what is coaching and how do we really differentiate it, because sometimes people confuse it with mentoring, and so I want to get really clear on what is a coaching style. And so I'm not just talking about having a formal coaching session with someone, but as a leader, even when you use a coach approach to your conversation, you have a much greater impact on them in changing their mind, changing how they see things, and actually making a difference in how they approach situations. Then we're going to take a look at what is the impact of coaching. Why would you even take the time to do this? Because it is a mental shift. Most of the time you were promoted to be a leader or a manager because you were really good at what you do and you know a lot of things. And now I'm saying go into a conversation not knowing and be curious. And so it takes a real mental shift and takes a little time to develop. So I want to take a look at why you would even want to, try to do that. And then I can't, actually teach you skills in this format, but I want to show you the basics, the things that are most important that you could actually go out and start using today that would make a huge difference. So again, I want to start by looking at, why are we even looking at this today? Why is this important? So I have a question that I'd like you to quickly answer, and I'll give you about 30 seconds. But I want you to think about people that have made a difference in your life. So somebody that did something or said something that made a difference to you, that changed the way you saw yourself and maybe the world around you. So did that person, and just you want to click on which one fits best for you and then hit submit. So did they teach you a new skill? Were they a good role model? You watched them and said, I want to be like them. Maybe they mentored you, showed you the ropes. Maybe they spent the time to really listen and understand you, what it is that you want and you need and you desire in your life. Maybe it was that person that totally believed in you, and maybe they believed in you even more than you believed in yourself, which, really helped you to recognize your potential, and or possibly that this was the person that had it in them to truly challenge you to be more. Whether it was in a good way or maybe it was a difficult way that they challenged you. So I'll give you another 20 seconds. Choose one of these that stands out the most, and then hit submit. And then we'll tally up the results. So I'm going to give you 5 more seconds. I know some of them are related. Okay, let's see. All right. Challenge you to be more. Okay. Isn't that amazing, too, that it's that, and they have to have pretty much believed in you, the one before that, in order to really challenge you. And you know what's so interesting is the whole concept of that leaders think they need to teach people and guide them, and then look at what the one that was the least chosen taught you a new skill. But there has to be integrity. The leader needs to be a good role model. They need to stand for what they represent, so that's really important. So I want to come back to this, as we go into the program. But big part of coaching, in order to coach someone, before you even go into the conversation, you have to check your own thoughts. Do you really believe in the person, believe in their potential? Even if they're disappointing you or making you angry right now, do you believe in them? And what is a way that you can challenge them so they can step up? So a lot of coaching, what coaching skill is reflecting to the person, what they're doing right now in a way that they can look at themselves. And then asking them the questions so they can ask themselves, really question their own thinking in a way that maybe will help them to see they can be more and they can do more. So a lot of this challenging them using reflection and questions is one of the most significant ways to help people grow. So thank you for that. We'll take a look at how that fits. And, I've been asking, I've been asking this question, recall someone who made a difference in your life. I've been asking this, for years. And the thing that what comes out is that they listened to me, they understood me, but it always comes out, they inspired me to be more than I thought I could be. That's the one that usually, stands out. And when people then give examples, that's what they say. The person that took the time to really see me, and help me think through what I was doing and how I was being so I could be more. And we're not saying that this is, again, has to be this formal conversation, but even when someone comes to you and asks you a question, instead of just giving them the answer right away, can you turn it back and ask them a question because you believe that they do have an answer? And that way you create a more independent team than people dependent on you. The interesting thing is that there's been some research done by the Human Capital Institute and MHS, who does the emotional intelligence, does many psychological tests. And they asked thousands of employees what they wanted their managers, what were the most important skills. And then they asked the managers, what do you think are the most important to develop? And it was fascinating how the employees wanted their managers to develop communication skills, but particularly coaching. They're actually using the word now. It took a couple years, but it's become like a common word. And empathy, of understanding where I'm at and how I see things, and starting at that point instead of just telling me how they see things. Yet the managers were all saying, I have to have an agile mindset, I have to be adaptable and flexible, I have to do problem-solving skills, which, yes, are important, but are very external and aren't relational. And yet probably your biggest problems that you're going to have to resolve are relational. So this is a question to ask yourself, what are you focusing on in your own development to be the best leader you can be? So when you look at even the concept of motivation, I prefer even to use the word inspiration. When we look at what really shifts people, what makes them want to do things differently, especially when you're dealing with someone who's a little stuck or resistant, it's an internal shift that has to be made. That oftentimes we think, we'll give them rewards, and if they don't do it, there'll be consequences. Yet that's motivation, and oftentimes then the motivation is external and it's based on fear. It's not because they want to. And so in coaching, we're really looking at how can we shift them out of fear into really desire and courage, into wanting them to do something different. How can we change if they're disappointed or even feel betrayed? How can you have that conversation to discover that? and find out what it's going to take to shift them into recommitting to the team and the organization. We need to find that out through conversation based on how they see things instead of just telling them what they need to do. So when we look at, what really is needed for people to change and grow, there are three things. Oftentimes I'll say, well, what do people want? And the leaders often say, oh, more money. Money is not really a motivation or inspiration factor. Money is an expectation. People either feel they're being paid enough or fairly, or they're not. And they react. And that's a different conversation. Once they feel that they're compensated fairly, then it's done. And if you give them more money, it might inspire them to work harder for a brief moment, but then it's done. It's not internal, it's still external. And then motivation, again, is the carrot and stick. If you've read anything by Daniel Pink, who writes about all the research that's been done that money rewards or giving people things for doing more is very fleeting and then sometimes detrimental. It's fascinating. His book, Drive, really looks at how there's actually negative effects to using external reward. We all do it, and it's still good to celebrate and acknowledge what people have done. I think it's great to do that, but don't necessarily think that that's what's going to inspire a person to truly change how they see themselves and the world. So what we're looking at with coaching is how do we help people think for themselves? And these days, especially with the younger generation coming in, they want to be developed. We know that, but that means mentally, not just skills. I was talking to a leader yesterday, and she said that her leaders felt that a coaching conversation was saying, okay, so what do you want to do with your career? All right, so if that's what you want, what skills do you want to develop, and giving them the skills. And you know what? That's not necessarily coaching. That is a development conversation. But the coaching conversation, it's not just skills. It's like, so what is it going to take for you to step up to be a leader, to run a team, to run a project? What are your fears? What are your, how do you see that happening? How are you going to handle conflict? How does that make you feel? What do you need? What kind of support? I mean, there's far more questions that you would ask in a developmental conversation that truly people feel that you're engaging them and helping them. So what we're talking about in developing people's mindset is that we're looking at coaching. And this is why it's become a regular competency on the leadership competency list. It's now becoming almost a required thing that you know how to do. So just to be clear, there are many hats that you'll wear as a leader, and I'm not saying you should always be coaching, because you won't be coaching. I teach coaching because most of the time you learn early how to tell people what to do. And there are times, definitely, you have to, lay out what the goals are. You might allow them to tell you how they're going to reach the goals, but you may have to lay them out. There's times you're going to have to teach them because they don't know. And so you would choose that, and that would be the mode, and you'd have your manager-teacher hat on. The mentor, and I want to be real clear, and I'm going to show you a couple slides. A mentor, if you're mentoring, you're not coaching. A mentor shares the benefit of their experience. Usually it's about the workplace or maybe a position. It could be about knowing other people in the workplace and how to deal with them. But it's still, the mentor is giving advice. It's still more the mentor does the talking. Where the coach, the primary mode of communication will be inquiry. It will be sharing reflections of what you hear the person saying and expressing, maybe even beyond their words, and asking them questions about that so they think for themselves. You make them stop and think about their thinking. And the interesting thing is see, we don't do this naturally. There's another great book by Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow, where he just points out that rarely do we stop and think about our thinking. And I love, there's an analogy where he says, we can't tickle ourselves. I mean, if you tried to tickle yourself right now, you'd see you can't. And it's the same thing with our brain. It's very difficult for us to stop and to truly analyze our own thinking, our thinking on our own. We tend to rationalize our decisions. But when somebody else stops you and says, okay, I hear what you're saying, and here's, particularly you said this, so tell me more about that, or what are the beliefs that led you to seeing the situation that way? Is it possible that there's another way of looking at this? Just those questions helps the person think about what they're thinking, and immediately they may see, oh, well, maybe there is another way of looking at this, which is far more effective than you saying, you know what, you need to look at it this way, which often doesn't work. As we don't like it when other people do that to us. So the mentor shares model. So again, we like having good mentors. We like seeing someone demonstrate the behavior that's helped them to be successful. And that came up in your list. They modeled the behavior. That's really important to us. Mentors guide, they advise, and they support us. But a coach... and a mentor then is still looking at externals. So we call this a transactional leader, both a manager and a mentor, is that they're looking at the externals of dealing with people, of goals, of how to do things. And the primary thing is they give us information, they give us advice, they give us their perspective. The coach then, on the other hand, asks questions. Tries to help us clarify. It's amazing sometimes when I help someone just clarify how they see a situation. Once they can see clearly how they see it, they immediately see the gaps in their logic, and what else they might need or what's missing. Sometimes I don't even have to go into different options and consequences, just the clarifying, because we don't sit down and think, okay, so how do I see this situation? What are all the factors that play into it? We don't do that on our own. So the coach clarifies, explores what else is possible, what's really stopping the person from moving forward, what are they afraid of really? A coach encourages them. That's where they're believing. You have to go in the conversation believing that the person can see other possibilities and they can step into being more. So they encourage, and they will often request willingness. Would you be willing to look at this in a different way, before they go into the conversation? We call a person who coaches a transformational leader because you're transforming the way the person sees the situation, so they choose on their own to do things differently, and it reveals, what else is possible to them instead of you telling them. And again, it not just expands their minds, but it helps for them to be a more independent thinker. So for one thing, they'll quit coming and asking you all the time, so give you more time to do things. Plus, most people are so grateful, and they remember the leader that helped them see things on their own. So to choose which hat you want to put on, you have to ask, when the person is stuck in a situation, or they're asking for your help, what do they really need from you? Maybe they need you to be the expert. And in these situations, if they do not have the knowledge required to make a decision, then you need to give them information and ideas. If they don't have the resources to do something, then please make sure that they have the tools and they're capable of being successful. If they honestly don't have the skills, give them training. But the problem I've seen over and over throughout the years is that so many times managers just jump to the conclusion that if somebody is not doing something, they must not know how, And then they go in and tell them how to do something when the person actually does know or has a basis of knowledge. And then it's very demotivating for someone to tell you what to do when you already know how to do it, but maybe there's something else going on. So again, first determine, do they really don't, is it, do they already have some knowledge and some resource and skill? And if that's the case, then you might look at, is it motivation that they just kind of don't want to do this? Then you need to ask them. You need to listen to them. What's going on? What's stopping them? What's making them feel that way? What is it that they need to move forward? So you want to listen to their story first. Maybe they feel overwhelmed. So many of us feel so overwhelmed these days. So first you want to hear how they see the situation. You might think that that they know what the priorities are and what they should be doing, but maybe they don't. And maybe they feel everything is on their shoulders. So explore with them, what are they doing? How are they prioritizing? What do they think is most important? Even knowing what their purpose is, for their position will help them identify, how they can manage their time better. And so many times it has to do with confidence, where they really need you to value them and respect them. It's amazing to me how many, especially even people who do a really good job, so many leaders spend their time on the problem people and forget the good workers. If those people need to be shown value and respect as well, or they could start looking for another job somewhere, or lose some of their drive. So you want to first determine what do they need. And just briefly I want to look at, and the main reason of why coaching works is that I hope you see that, the difference between external and internal is that when you're the expert and you're presenting information, you're giving answers, you're directing them, that pacifies their brain. But when you're coaching, you're guiding the conversation only in the way that you're following a particular coaching path. You're not guiding them to your outcome. You really want to hear what they think, so hopefully they then come up with a solution. So you ask a lot of questions. You influence them by helping them think, and this activates their brain. So if you look at the difference in the thinking brain, this is often what we engage when we tell people what to do. So I want you to think about, how many times you've gotten upset with someone because you told them to do something and then they didn't do it and they say they forgot. Well, that's not necessarily their fault. Right? These days we're so overloaded. And when you tell someone to do something, it goes into short-term memory. Short-term memory is just that. It's very short-term. And as soon as it's crowded out with other things, it's gone. So just telling people and giving them, even your vision and, and all the information you want them to have is not really all that effective. And then if you give them consequences, if they don't do this, this will happen. What you activate is the part of the brain, the fear part of the brain, where they only learn one way of doing things. This is also where we learn motor skills. So you learn how to drive a car. You always know how to drive a car, ride a bike. You don't have to think about it. In fact, you probably drive for miles without thinking, and fortunately this part of your brain takes over. But this part of the brain has no access to creativity. People just do what they've always done, and this is why they resist change. They learn one way, and it's very difficult for them to change the way they do things. They don't have access to the middle brain where creativity is, and so you're asking them to change a very structural, physiological part of their learning. They have to learn completely new things, and keep practicing until the old kind of recedes. It's a very difficult way of teaching, and it's even less efficient than telling them what to do. So the remembering brain is in the middle. It's very emotion-based. If you tell me to do something and I don't really care that much, it's not going to get into long-term memory. Information has to be attached to emotion. I have to be excited. I have to be interested in order for it to lodge into my long-term memory. But what's interesting, what's also there is insight-based learning. So if you ask me a question that makes me stop and think about my thinking, and all of a sudden I see something new, or I go, oh my God, I've been doing this for years. I had no idea, that people were intimidated by me when I do this. I thought I was helping them, or where I all of a sudden see the impact of my behavior, or I realize I haven't seen the big picture. What happens is it's immediately lodged into long-term memory. And not only that, I am immediately committed to the change. So there's commitment that's attached to insight. So instead of you going through this long change cycle where I have to let go of the past and mourn it and go through the awkward stage. I mean, it still may be awkward as I go to make my changes, but I'm far more committed when it comes based on my own insight. So your most efficient way of working with people is to help them shift their own thinking and create insights, because then they change their behavior on their own, and it's not this long, drawn-out deal. So it's worth it for you, to take the time to learn, coaching technique. Because yes, we do learn if you tell me something that, oh yes, that really supports what I already believe in, what I already know, and I love it, then I will learn it. But when you're dealing with people that are stuck or resistant, I've got this little force field that comes up, and you're going to have to break through that, and you have to cut through my meaning-making machine. You've got to help me see that my thinking may not be full or may be faulty. So learning happens when it's really a disruption, because my brain has to stop and restructure. It's like, oh my God, how I thought things aren't true. And it takes a moment, for the brain to restructure, so the person might be quiet. And then they might even get emotional. They might get embarrassed. They may laugh at themselves. They may even get a little angry. And then you move into the conversation. So it's not necessarily comfortable, but it's profound. And so that's what it is that you're trying to achieve. So I'm not going to say this is easy and you'll love it, but it's amazing. And every person I've worked with, when I teach them coaching skills, in the class they're like, oh, I don't know, this is kind of, going to take time. I have so much to do. But then when they go out and do it, and they watch it happen, the shift take place in a person, and they go through that, oh, wow, oh, my God, I am doing that. And then they change. It's like they say it was the most amazing thing. And so when we have follow-up sessions, they all say, yeah, if they did it, they're committed to using coaching skills. So, so it's worth taking the time, and again, it's an interesting process. So what happens are emotions are triggered by a powerful question or disruptive reflective statement, and I'm going to show you what that is in a moment. So how you do this, basically, you allow them to tell their story. You listen to their stories. And what are the patterns that they use to create what they're holding as reality? So you're listening for their assumptions. You're listening for their beliefs. And you want to reflect that back. So you believe this, or you're assuming this. Or when you do this, this is what you think happens. How do you know what they think? So you're observing the stories, and then you ask, what are the assumptions, the beliefs? What is it that you are afraid might happen if you confront that person about their behavior? What is it that you really need from people that you're not asking them? You ask them about their fears and their needs, as well as their assumptions and beliefs. And that, again, prompts them to think about their thinking and create that insight moment. And the insight could just be a simple thing like, oh, wow, yeah, that's true, to, oh, my God, I need to go think about that. I remember a leader once said to me, I was complaining about the team, nobody was stepping up, they weren't doing any, the things that they should be doing, and he said to me, wow, it always seems like everyone disappoints you. Will anyone ever be good enough for you? And that question took my breath away. And I had to go think about it. And he was right. I'm a high achiever and I do everything right. And nobody does it my way. But what was happening then was I was always in judgment and actually distancing people from me. So there were deeper things there as well. It's like they had to be wrong for me to be right, and crazy things. But I couldn't look at that until he asked that question, and it immediately changed my behavior and how I thought about people. And it helped me to be a much better leader just with that reflection and that question. So that's what we're looking at doing. And again, the younger generation, they really are expecting to be engaged differently. They want to be they want to develop, they want to be developed mentally as well as their skills. And when you help them to think through, it's just like, there is a gratitude there, even though they may be resistant at first, because you're helping them see things. So there's a lot of ROI studies, return on investment, return on engagement studies that have been done on coaching. These are just a few places you can find them. But if you're looking, when you try to do coaching, it's always nice when other people are doing it so you can talk about it. So if you're needing to convince anyone in your organization, there's some great studies out there. But before we go on, I want to show you just briefly the main skills, but I would just want to know if there's any questions on what I've laid out so far.
Yeah, perfect, Marcia. One of the questions that has come in is, how do you help people realize that they have problems and need help or assistance or coaching?
Yeah. Well, you know what? There's a difference between someone coming to you with a problem and then you would go into coaching right away than what the person is asking, where you would present the situation before you go into the coaching. So, I like using the AID feedback model, where I tell someone, here's the behavior that you're doing, and here's the impact. It's really more about the impact than the behavior. So, like, I have a person, I had a client who, she wants to be a leader, and perceived as a leader. She's, again, a very high achiever. She was like me, and she just felt that everyone else wasn't pulling their weight. And so in the meeting, she would, be correcting them and rolling her eyes and things. And so I focused on, in the meeting, when you jump in and you correct people and you roll your eyes when they give ideas, what's happening is they now don't feel comfortable presenting ideas around you, and they wouldn't necessarily want to work for you as their leader. Would you be interested in changing that so you might be perceived as a leader in this? And what that led to was us looking at what she felt her role was, because she really felt her role was efficiency, which may be true, but that it conflicted with her desire to be seen as a leader, and she had to see it in different ways. So it was the impact. But, you do need to then know what it is they desire. So when I said, would you be interested in looking at how you could be perceived as a leader, I knew she wanted that. Also her boss had said, until she changes that, she's not getting promoted. So there were also the consequence, but I didn't want to focus on that. I wanted to focus on her being seen as a leader. So you have to start it out, and then you go into coaching. Here's what's happening. Here's the impact. Would you be willing to look at the situation and just see what's going on? Just spend some time with me, even if that's the next question. And then you would ask them to tell their perspective. You would then go into the coaching from there. Hopefully that would open up the conversation. So I hope that helps.
Perfect. Did you want to take another question?
We can do one more.
Okay. How do personality traits affect how you coach or mentor?
Yeah. Well, there are different personality communication styles. Many of you have probably taken DISC or Myers-Briggs or something like that. And so it's always good to adapt your style. If I've got a very direct person, like I coach a lot of executives and I have to be very direct. I get right into the coaching and frankly, being brutally honest with what I hear them saying and getting it, and asking them really tough questions is what they want from me. And so I have to be courageous and even be wrong. Because if I'm wrong, it still opens the door for them to say, no, you're wrong, this is it. So the direct style is important. Where if I've got more of an influencer, people person, I may need to, it's sometimes those people I help them laugh at themselves. I'll say, hey, so let me just share with you, a little thing here, what's the word? I can't think of it. Where they say one thing and then it totally conflicts with something else. It's like, you kind of contradicted yourself. So it's just a little lighter in there. May even have to have a little more personal conversation up front. You just kind of adapt your style. If it's a more analytical one, we really look more at beliefs and assumptions and how their facts may not be true facts. It's what is it? Aristotle said, a belief is it's what we can justify as a belief. But if there's other things that they're not taking into consideration, it's like, have you considered this? Have you considered that? And bringing in some other possibilities so they could see that their belief might be limited. So yes, I would, try to figure out their style and adapt to that. I think in communications that's always important. So thank you for that. Part of coaching, the big part of coaching is listening. And as you listen, you really kind of get a sense of who the person is. And if you're open and you're curious and you really care about them, it's almost like you naturally adapt their style. Instead of you wanting to be, the expert that has the answer and telling them what to do, again, you're fully believing in them and respecting them. You're going to hear them in a whole different way and speak to them differently. So I hope that helps. So the basic skills of coaching, really we look at how do we shift someone from focusing on this is a problem and I'm stuck, to what are all the possibilities that might create a new awareness and new solutions. And so again, the basic toolkit, I can't teach it here, but these are the things you would focus on, and I would hope you would, want to learn more about it. Is you have to really learn tools of building a rapport because you are digging deep, and there has to be trust. And honestly, if the person doesn't trust you, you may have to build some trust first. And really look at what broke the trust. Did they think you weren't honest with them? Is it just baggage? You might even ask them, so what's it going to take for you to trust me? You might have to have that. But also, the whole believing in them and showing them that you believe in their potential will build trust. We're going to take a look at third-level listening, what that means. The main skills, as I've mentioned, are questioning and reflection, but you have to also use a lot of silence because their brain is restructuring, and so you need to give them that time. And so many times when I've been teaching people coaching, that they jump in and ask another question and stack their questions, and it just, and then the person just gets resistant. So you do have to ask yourself, do I have any assumptions that might get in the way of me coaching this person? Do I think they're broken? Do I think they're wrong? Can you let that go? At least, and believe in their potential, at least 5, 10, 15 minutes. Can you do that? If not, you may have to move into a different conversation. Remember, they want you to be present more than they need you to be perfect. You don't have to be the perfect coach. But if you just use these things, it's amazing how well they'll work. So don't think you have to be perfect to go in and just be there with them and ask some questions. The third level of listening is, the first level is where we usually live. I listen to myself, what I think about what they're saying, what I want to say, finish their sentence, what I have to do, and so it's time to end this conversation. We listen to ourselves, and so first you need to get present and listen to their words. And if you just start here and reflect back what you hear them saying, that's a good place to start. Eventually you can get to a point to where you can actually hear what they're not saying. What's the belief that's framing how they see things? I heard this guy say the other day, Richard Boyatzis, he said, people can't see outside of the box until they see the box. And so you need to help them see the assumptions and beliefs that are framing the way they see the situation, because then you can get into maybe what they're missing. And then when they express an emotion, what are they really angry about? What are they really afraid of? If you hear that emotion, if you sense it, ask about it. And then you might look at what do you really want here? What's holding you back? Common needs, it's amazing when how many leaders that I speak to that are so afraid of confronting someone because they're afraid that they won't be seen as a good leader. People won't like them and they won't respect them. Where on the other hand, everyone knows there's a problem and then they disrespect the leader who doesn't confront the situation. Sometimes people get angry because they really didn't get the appreciation or recognition they needed. We forget to praise people specifically and honor the work they've done. In times of change, people are afraid of losing control. I had this woman saying, we had to move my department into a new building, and everybody was complaining because they were going to lose their good parking spaces. And I said, it's not really the parking spaces, is it? And she said, no, probably not. They're just mad that they were told they had to move. And I said, yeah, things are different now. They don't know what it's going to be like. It's going to disrupt their daily flow. When they feel, and why did they have to move? It's not logical. So what little bits of control can you give them? What decisions, can you give them that they can make about their new space to help them get this back? These are the things you can only find out when you start asking the right questions. You reflect back and you ask. So you discover what's really going on here. What is it that, how do they see the situation? And then what's the block? So we're looking really for the barrier and the block to them moving forward. The intention is to help them to see this for themselves so they know what they need to do next. And again, the moment that you ask them that really tough question or that question that makes them stop and think, what happens is as soon as the brain realizes that, oh my God, the way I meant to, how I formed my perception and how I see the situation maybe is wrong. So the brain has to quickly restructure. This is what's called an aha moment. And it takes a moment for the brain to restructure. So they may stare at you for a moment, and it looks like like a baby. When a baby's seen something for the very first time, they stare before they decide to cry or laugh. And it's the same thing with an adult. They may stare at you for a moment, and then they could even have an emotional reaction once they realize the real truth. You have to allow allow them the moment of nothing and the emotion, and then just even say, ask them about, so what is it you see now? Ask them to articulate the new awareness. You have to get to what is it. They might say, oh my God, I see it now. I see, something different. What is it that you see? Because you're going to build on that. So get them to articulate the new awareness before you move on. So what this looks like, and this is the model that I've just developed for my book, and it always starts with getting clear, either by asking them, what is it that you want to achieve here? What is it you really want to happen? Or if you're initiating the conversation like the first question, you may have to say, I really want for people to see you as and choose for you to be their leader. Would you be willing to look at that? What is it you want to create? So don't just focus on the problem, look at the outcome. And then you move into this more spontaneous conversation where you're reflecting, exploring, and acknowledging. before you then move back to directing the conversation where you make sure that there's a commitment for what's next. Even if they need to go away and think about it. It's like, so what are you going to do in order to think about it? How are you going to carve out the time? When will we meet next? So there's just different questions. What do you want? What do you need? What's stopping you? What do you know to be true right now? I was coaching an executive team, and they were all complaining because their leader for 14 years was retiring. And they were just telling me how awful it was going to be because it was because they didn't have any control over who was going to come in next. It wasn't going to be one of them. And I listened to them. I let them complain about it, and then I said, I hear that you're all afraid of what's going to happen when the new leader comes in. And I hear you're all very sad that the current leader is leaving. But tell me right now in this very moment, what do you know to be true? Finally, someone said, well, I guess the only thing we know is we're going to get a new leader. I said, okay, based on that fact, what is it you need to do? So I allowed them to express their emotion first. I acknowledged it. Then I asked them the question. And then finally someone said, I guess we need to shore up our succession planning so we can weather any leader. So we moved into the possibility. And so then people look at what they might do, but they're a little afraid. You need to say, what's the worst that could happen? What are you afraid of? What are you angry about? What are you willing to do? Coaching, I was reading this article where coaching, they actually mapped the mind of rappers. And they said rappers start their song very cognitively, and then they end it very cognitively, but in the middle, all the judgment and censoring and self-thinking shuts down, and they live mostly in their middle brain, and they just allow thoughts to come forward. And this is what happens when you're really listening to someone deeply, and you open your head, and I teach how to also open your heart and your gut, then it's amazing, what things come up. So I wanted to see if there's any final questions before I wrap up. And I know this is very quick, but I hope it gives you kind of a sense of coaching.
There's definitely some more questions. I don't know if we'll get to all of them, but we'll try to do our best here. Are there any particular tips for approaching apathy? I really care a lot, so it's hard for me to deal with those who don't.
Yeah. You have to watch your judgment first because we often think apathy is, they don't care and they're lazy. Go in trying to look for what is causing the apathy in the first place. Did they start their job with apathy, or what happened? And I would even bring it up. It's like, and ask them. It's like when you started this job, you had excitement. What happened that you lost it? And really be curious about that. Or maybe they're just doing their job because they're going to college, and it's just a job for now. But then to ask the question, so what would it take to get you more interested and excited about this work you're doing now? Is there anything about your job that relates to, your future? What can we do to help you for your future, even if it's to leave this place? So again, going in with curiosity, about what happened. And then if they didn't care from the beginning, then I wonder, what that was all about. And sometimes it could even be because the team doesn't support this person. Maybe this is the outcast, and now they just don't care, or did they feel betrayed by the organization? You've got to hear from them what caused the apathy. I would reflect to them. It seems to me that, you've lost your interest. Would you be willing to have a conversation with me about that? I would bet that it's no fun to get up in the morning and go to a job you just don't want to. Would you be willing to look at how that might change?
Right.
So, yeah. What else?
The next question, how do you coach the high achiever who feels like they no longer should be in their current role, but in a different role that may not essentially exist?
Yeah. Well, there is a reality there. In recognizing, I know that you want more. And I would love to, you still get them to talk about what is their vision, and again, you've got to be willing to work with people recognizing that they may leave your organization. But they're going to leave anyway. If they're a high achiever and they're not happy, they're going to leave anyway. So they're more likely to be loyal to the leader that helps them think and is interested in helping them than the one that is ignoring them. So of laying it out on the table, I know there isn't a position right now, but, there could be, I'm sure there is one for you in the future, whether it's here or somewhere else. What can we look at what would be good for you to focus on, maybe leading some projects or giving them, visibility with the top leadership team, or what could they, how can you help them to be that leader when the time comes in their life? And knowing that if they're not a leader now, they can't possibly have all the skills that they need to be a leader, although they may think so. But give them something to lead, and coach them along the way so they run into some problems and you can work with them. So hopefully they recognize that. It's a tough situation. We high achievers always want more.
Okay, I think we have time. Do we have time for one more, Marcia?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, one more.
Okay. So does this work both ways? If you are a middle ground manager, meaning there may be higher-ups, can this work for influencing how they interact with people around them? How would you address someone higher in a position versus someone you manage?
Boy, coaching can work, again, but you've got to go in with the intention, not that you're fixing someone. I need to fix my boss, but that you believe. I had a coach say to me once when I was dealing with my boss and said, remember he's doing the best with what he knows right now, and you just happen to, have actually had more experiences and more education than him, and so you need to model the behavior you want, and help him step up. And I'm like, oh my God, of course I need to do that. I'm going down to his level. So, yes, but go in with the intention that the person has the possibility of seeing more and being more, and just say, just asking them some questions about the situation and is there any other way of seeing it. They may not be willing to allow you to do this, but I think it's worth trying. They certainly aren't going to just listen to you telling them. So there's more possibility of being able to coach up than telling up. So good luck with that. But I coach, again, a lot of executives that think they know everything. And then just by asking the question, I had this one guy saying, well, I have an open-door policy. I don't know why people don't come in and ask for coaching. I'm like, so how many leaders did you ever go to and ask for coaching in your time? And he's like, oh, I never did that. So what makes you think your leaders are, right now are going to do that for you? So, it's like, oh, well, I hadn't thought about it. So, you just never know when it could work. So, and again, if you have other questions, I will answer them by email. I do want to say that if you're curious and you want to learn more about coaching, really think through. There's a lot on the Internet about coaching. And you want to encourage coaching in your environment because it's difficult to try to develop these skills alone. It's great to have a little group to practice with and to talk about coaching and how's it going for you. And I just want to share, my book will be out in October, and it's going to have a lot of things of handling uncomfortable conversations and how do you shift them using coaching skill. But in the meantime, if you go to my website, I'm blogging a lot now. Before that time and sharing a lot of tips, so you might want to sign up for different things that will help you. The last one I wrote was on helping people step up who don't want to. So it should be useful. So
all right.
That's it.
Okay, so thanks so much for your insights, Marcia. As Marcia mentioned, if we didn't get to your questions, I will be sending them to her, and she will get back to you via email. And then I'll share her email address if you're a bit too shy to ask a question through this platform. You may email her individually. At this time, I would like to remind you of our Top 10 DVD series. Now all of our Top 10 webinars from last year can be shared with your staff and used in future trainings. So please visit the link in the resource list to find out more information about that. We hope you enjoyed this presentation. I would like to take this time to thank our sponsor, once again, Unity Lab Services, part of Thermo Fisher Scientific, without whom this webinar series would not be possible. Please join us next month on September 3rd when professional speaker Randy Anderson presents Getting the Controlled Environment Under Control, Organizing for Greater Productivity. So watch your email for more details on that. Once again, thank you, Marcia, for your insights, and I'd also like to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy schedules to join us today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.